Do you find yourself easily eliminating two answer choices, but then end up choosing the wrong one of the last two of them? Here's a strategy to help choose more correct answers. I'll show you what I mean by pay attention to grammar on an actual MCAT question. This is a typically missed type of question, one that seems easy with fundamentals, but is also easily missed. Pause the video and take a moment to answer the question on your own before I get into it. You can even click an answer in the interactive quiz. The question is asking which would most readily push a non-spontaneous reaction forward, considering all conditions are constant and no catalyst is present. This is a standalone question, and as you can see, no specs are given about the reaction. It's just about some non-spontaneous reaction. As you process each of the answer choices, you have to consider all conditions constant, meaning don't think about anything else but what's mentioned in each answer choice, and independently from each other. For example, for answer choice A, think about whether decreasing pressure would make a non-spontaneous reaction proceed forward to products without changing temperature, concentrations, or anything else. If you're thinking it's hard to figure out whether pressure changes would affect it without knowing any specs about the reaction, whether it even involves gases or how many moles of reactants versus moles of products there are, the typical things you should think about when considering pressure changes, then eliminate the answer because it's too specific to be correct for a non-specific question. The same applies to answer choice B. Without knowing whether the reaction is endo or exothermic, you can't conclude on temperature changes, so eliminate this answer as well. You probably easily eliminated A and B and were down to C or D. And if you chose C, you're going to be surprised and even dismayed that C is not the correct answer. D is. C says lowering activation energy of the reaction, and D says increasing activation energy for the reaction. I know C immediately sounds like the correct answer, and maybe what you chose because you envisioned a reaction profile, and lowering the activation energy would indeed help it proceed forward. But this lower activation energy is only accomplished with a catalyst, and C cannot be the correct answer because the question says no catalyst present. If that's not what you were thinking, or you just can't see choosing increasing activation energy, then pay careful attention to grammar between these two answer choices. C says lowering activation energy of the reaction, and D says increasing activation energy for the reaction. At first, this doesn't seem like a big difference, but lowering activation energy of a reaction is referring to the activation energy measure between the reactants and the intermediate or transition state, and this is an inherent quality of the reaction, meaning it is what it is based on the reactants and their intermediate or transition state, which more specifically means that it cannot be changed or does not change unless a catalyst is added. But remember, the question said considering no catalyst present, which means C cannot be the correct answer, D is. To explain how increasing activation energy more readily pushes a non-spontaneous reaction forward, activation energy is fundamentally defined as the energy required to activate the reactants to become an intermediate or transition state, meaning the energy required to initiate the reaction, which simply means it's the energy reactants absorb to make it to their intermediate or transition state, regardless of whether a reaction is net endothermic or net exothermic. And activation energy must be applied to reactions, especially for non-spontaneous reactions. And if you increase activation energy for a reaction, it doesn't change the measured activation energy level. It just helps the reactants more easily reach their intermediate or transition state. So increasing activation energy for a reaction actually means applying more energy for the reactants to absorb to help them more readily react, which is why D is the correct answer. Paying attention to fundamentals is important, but just as important as paying attention to grammar and answer choices, as well as questions, to be more accurate when choosing the correct answer among two that you may be torn between. Simple as that.